Rain poured from the gray morning sky as if the world itself had given up. Cars rushed past without slowing, people hurried with their umbrellas, and no one noticed the exhausted single father standing outside a small roadside diner with only enough money for one simple breakfast. He hadn't eaten properly in nearly 2 days because every dollar he earned went toward keeping his little daughter safe and fed. That morning, hunger twisted painfully inside his stomach, but something far more powerful than hunger was about to change his life forever. Before we begin, if you believe one act of kindness can change someone's destiny, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, share this story with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Kindness Legacy. Together, let's spread stories that remind the world compassion still exists. Miles Rowan was only 34, but life had carved deep lines across his face. 3 years earlier he had lost his wife, Marin, to a sudden illness that left him alone to raise their 6-year-old daughter, Ivy. Since then, every sunrise had become another battle against bills, exhaustion, and loneliness. He worked nights repairing delivery trucks and spent mornings taking Ivy to school before trying to sleep a few hours. There were weeks when he skipped meals so Ivy could have fresh fruit in her lunchbox instead of crackers. He never complained because every smile on his daughter's face reminded him why he kept fighting. That rainy Tuesday had started worse than most. His old pickup barely made it to the diner before sputtering to a stop. He searched every pocket until he found enough coins to buy one breakfast sandwich and a small coffee. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get him through another long shift. As Miles stepped inside the warm diner, he noticed everyone staring toward the corner booth. A young woman sat there soaked from the rain, her blonde hair dripping onto her torn sweater. Tears streamed endlessly down her face. She looked exhausted, frightened, and completely defeated. Some customers whispered that she must be homeless. Others avoided looking at her altogether. Even the waitress seemed unsure whether she could pay for anything. Miles ordered his breakfast and quietly watched the woman. When the waitress placed the warm sandwich into his hands, he felt the familiar ache of hunger. Then he looked back at the woman whose trembling hands were wrapped around an empty cup of water. Something inside him refused to let him eat while another human being looked so broken. Without thinking twice, Miles carried the plate to her table and gently placed it in front of her. He smiled with tired eyes that understood suffering without needing explanations. The woman hesitated before accepting the food, as though kindness had become something she no longer expected from strangers. Tears rolled even faster as she slowly took her first bite, almost unable to believe someone had given away the only meal they had. Miles simply wished her well before walking out into the rain with nothing but his coffee. His stomach growled all morning, but strangely his heart felt lighter. Life, however, showed no immediate reward. The next several weeks became even harder. The garage where Miles worked announced layoffs after losing several large contracts. Although he was one of the most dependable mechanics, senior workers were kept while newer employees were dismissed. Miles suddenly found himself unemployed with barely enough savings to pay rent. He spent every day searching for work while hiding his fears from Ivy. At night he helped her with homework by candlelight because they were trying to save electricity. Sometimes he pretended he wasn't hungry so she would finish the last bowl of soup. Every sacrifice reminded him of the promise he had made beside Marin's hospital bed, that Ivy would always know she was loved. Neighbors noticed how hard Miles worked but could do little beyond offering encouragement. Pride prevented him from asking for help, yet every morning he dressed neatly, carried copies of his resume, and knocked on business after business hoping someone would give him a chance. Most employers never called back. Others told him he was overqualified. Some simply ignored him. The rejection slowly chipped away at his confidence, but every afternoon when Ivy ran into his arms after school, he forced himself to smile. She believed her father could fix anything, and he refused to let her lose that faith. One afternoon they walked through a neighborhood park sharing a single ice cream cone because buying two wasn't possible. Ivy laughed as birds chased crumbs near the fountain, and Miles realized happiness had nothing to do with money. It lived in moments like these, small, ordinary memories that would last forever. Meanwhile, the woman from the diner never forgot the stranger who had fed her. Her name was Celeste Varden. Only weeks before meeting Miles, Celeste had survived a terrifying kidnapping attempt connected to a bitter legal dispute surrounding her late grandfather's enormous estate. During her escape she lost her phone, identification, and belongings before wandering for days trying to reach authorities. Exhausted, frightened, and unable to prove who she was. She had been mistaken for a homeless woman. By the time she entered that diner, she hadn't eaten in nearly 48 hours. Miles never asked for her story. He simply saw another human being who needed help. That single act stayed with Celeste long after she safely reunited with her legal team. Her attorneys, investigators, and security advisors spent weeks tracking down the anonymous man described only as the exhausted father who gave away his breakfast. Eventually, a receipt from the diner, security footage, and local witnesses led them to Miles Rowan. One ordinary Friday morning, Miles was repairing a neighbor's broken lawn mower for a few extra dollars when 3 black luxury vehicles stopped outside his modest home. He assumed someone had the wrong address. Instead, several sharply dressed attorneys approached respectfully, introducing themselves as representatives of Celeste Varden. Miles stared in complete confusion. He honestly believed there had been some terrible mistake. The lead attorney explained that their client wished to personally thank the man who had shown compassion when the world had turned its back on her. Miles laughed nervously because he couldn't imagine why lawyers would travel across the state over one breakfast sandwich. They invited him to a meeting the following afternoon. Unsure whether to trust them, Miles almost declined. Curiosity finally convinced him to go. When he entered the elegant office building, he felt painfully out of place wearing his only suit, a worn jacket that no longer fit properly. Then the conference room door opened. Standing there was the same woman from the diner, healthy, confident, and smiling through grateful tears. She embraced Miles before words could even form. For several emotional minutes, she explained everything that had happened after their meeting. She admitted that during her darkest hour, when everyone judged her appearance, one stranger had reminded her humanity still existed. His kindness had restored her hope long before the lawyers, police, or wealth could rescue her spirit. Then came the surprise that changed everything. Celeste had recently inherited her grandfather's manufacturing company, but years of corruption had nearly destroyed employee morale. She wanted leaders who understood compassion rather than greed. After weeks of investigation, her team had learned everything about Miles, his spotless work history, his honesty, his devotion to Ivy, and the countless quiet acts of kindness he had shown neighbors over the years without expecting recognition. Instead of offering charity, Celeste offered opportunity. She invited Miles to become director of community operations, overseeing apprenticeship programs, employee support initiatives, and charitable outreach across the company. The salary was more money than Miles had ever imagined earning. Health insurance covered Ivy completely. Educational benefits guaranteed her future. There was even a company vehicle and housing assistance. Miles struggled to believe any of it was real. Tears filled his eyes as he realized one simple decision, to give away breakfast, had somehow rewritten the future he feared was slipping away. The months that followed transformed more than his finances. Miles approached his new role exactly as he had lived his life. He listened before judging. He visited factory workers personally. He created emergency assistance funds for struggling families. He introduced scholarship programs for employees' children. He partnered with local shelters to provide meals and job training. Rather than measuring success only through profits, the company began measuring hope restored, families helped, and futures rebuilt. Employee satisfaction reached record highs. Communities once forgotten found renewed support. People didn't admire Miles because he became successful. They admired him because success never changed the gentle heart he already possessed. Little Ivy watched proudly as her father received community leadership awards. Yet her favorite moments remained the quiet evenings when they cooked dinner together, laughed over board games, and remembered the difficult days that had taught them gratitude. Miles often told her that kindness wasn't valuable because it might be rewarded. Kindness mattered because another person's invisible battle could be heavier than anyone imagined. Years later, reporters frequently asked Miles what the greatest investment of his life had been. Many expected him to mention business decisions or career opportunities. Instead, he always smiled and remembered one rainy morning, one hungry stomach, and one breakfast sandwich placed gently before a stranger. That had been the smallest gift he ever gave. Yet it produced the greatest miracle he ever received. If this story has touched your heart, please like this video, leave a heartfelt comment, share it with someone who still believes in kindness, and subscribe to Kindness Legacy. Your support helps us continue sharing true-to-life stories that inspire millions to never stop believing in compassion. Blue Heart special request. Comment below with the words, "Kindness always comes back." We'd love to see how many people still believe that one small act of goodness can change someone's life forever. As the sun set outside their new home one peaceful evening, Miles and Ivy sat together on the front porch watching golden light stretch across the neighborhood. The same man who once walked away hungry now had enough to help countless others eat. He finally understood that kindness is never measured by the size of the gift, but by the love behind it. Sometimes the smallest sacrifice echoes through lives we may never fully understand, returning in ways no one could ever predict. And somewhere beyond the fading sunset, hope quietly reminded the world that the greatest miracles often begin with nothing more than a compassionate heart willing to share its last meal.